Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Reserved Investments, and thank you for joining me. This is part 6 of my 18,000 subscriber Q&A series. Spoiler alert, there's most definitely going to be a part 7. There's probably going to be a part 8, and there's potentially going to be a part 9, depending on how many questions we are able to get through in this segment alone. So let's dive right in, head first, and get to the questions. First question. Sean, how and why did you get into the antiques and collectibles trade at the ripe young age of 12? It was basically due to the outcome of the junk wax era. We didn't know it at the time, but back when I got into the trade, I had a modest collection of modern era sports cards, and almost overnight, I saw their value evaporate 80 to 90%. And this set off a quest for me to figure out why this happened, because I was always intellectually curious. At this particular point in time, I was also collecting coins and also comic books. And one of the things that I couldn't help notice is the Carson City Morgan silver dollar that my grandfather gave to me at that particular point in time held its value and started going up in value. But all of these modern era mass-produced sports cards crashed and burned. So I sought to figure out why this happened. So I reached out to a lot of dealers. I went to a lot of sports card shows at the time, and I continued to ask questions. And my curiosity grew, my understanding of these markets grew, and I started to learn about not only baseball cards, but rare coins, comic books, vintage and antique toys, art glass, art pottery, traditional antiques, antique bottles, artwork. You can see where I'm going with this. I developed a passion for a lot of this stuff and wanted to learn more and more about it. And it just so happens I was lucky enough to grow up in Boyertown, Pennsylvania. Boyertown, Pennsylvania is roughly 50 minutes away from Adamstown, Pennsylvania. And if you Google Adamstown, Pennsylvania, you're going to come across the moniker where Adamstown, Pennsylvania is known as the antique capital of the United States. There's a plethora of different collectors, dealers, and investors all nestled in and around the Philadelphia area that was able to teach me the ropes as to how these markets work, both over the short term and over the long term. So that's really what set off my quest to understand how markets in the antiques and collectibles trade perform overall. And that's really what the crux of this channel is. I teach collectible finance. I also write for Antiques and Auction News. And if you follow me through Antiques and Auction News and you read the articles that I write, I talk an awful lot about understanding the basics of collectible finance. And once I started learning the core fundamentals as to what makes these markets tick, it made sense to me how much of a fool I was thinking that putting money, even at the age of 11 or 12, in modern era sports cards, when manufacturers like Topps, Donruss, Flair, Score, Upper Deck just continue to pump out product, I realized how stupid I was. And that's why I warn you guys about mass-produced scarcity. That's why I teach a lot of the core fundamentals on this channel that warn about speculation in some of these markets. In the 1980s, I was also introduced to the work of Harry Rinker, who was a well-known published author and expert in the antiques and collectibles trade. And Harry Rinker used to really anger a lot of dealers, a lot of hardcore collectors, a lot of investors in these markets because he was a contrarian when it came to speculation and investing in these markets, especially over the long term. And a lot of his predictions turned out to be 100% true. That's why he gets a lot of credit for forming a lot of the opinions I have about how some of these markets work, even in the year 2025. There's a lot of risk in these markets. And unfortunately today, most speculators, collectors, wannabe investors, they learn about the antiques and collectibles trade through TikTok, through YouTube, through social media, through collecting forums. And unfortunately, most of the people that talk about investing in these markets online are wearing rose-colored glasses. They're telling you that you cannot go wrong. Everybody loves Super Mario. Everybody loves Pokemon. Everybody loves Star Wars. Everybody invests in all of these items, and these items are going to continue to go up exponentially. And unfortunately, if you actually do market research, you will see that 97 to 98% of you watching would be better off sticking with an S&P 500 index fund rather than trying your luck at investing or speculating in a lot of these overblown, overheated markets at present time. There are core lessons you have to learn if you want to be successful in these markets. Even just if you're attempting to speculate in these markets over the short term, you must learn to control your emotions. You must learn to keep FOMO, fear of missing out, in check, or you will get slapped in the face with a stale donut. It's just like when I started this channel, we had the run-up in prices in graded video games. I was there warning you all, this is a massive speculative bubble that is going to come crashing down. And what happened? Prices came crashing down. That's exactly what happened. How did I know that? Because I have a core education in not only finance, but understanding how markets in the antiques and collectibles trade work. And that's what I give you as a gift just for tuning in to this YouTube channel. You don't even have to utilize any of my services as a consultant in the trade. If you watch this channel, you will get an education in investing and speculating in the antiques and collectibles trade. I warn you, the content that I produce is designed to be triggering. I was told when I started this channel, it would never get off the ground because the minute that some of my videos started going viral, there were critics that were screaming at me, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about, avoid reserved investments, he's telling you the wrong information because he doesn't want you to invest in these markets. That is 100% false. You can make a lot of money in these markets, but you have to understand the basics. You have to know what you're doing, and you must understand that these markets operate differently over the short term versus that of the long term. And those of you that come to me and say, Sean, in 20 years, these Pokemon cards over here are going to be sought after. People are going to be going nuts for them. They're going to be selling for a lot more than what they're selling for today. I have no idea how you can predict that because I've been in these markets since the age of 12. Spoiler alert, I'm now approaching the age of 49, and I have a lot of experience, and even I can't guarantee that. Do I think Pokemon's going to be a thing 10, 20, 30 years from now? Absolutely. But I can't predict what the prices are going to be. And if you can, I really would caution anyone from taking your advice because even hardcore experts in the trade, I already mentioned some, Harry Rinker, Wayne Jordan, a lot of these guys that write the books that I teach on this very channel, they don't even know what the future's going to hold. So that's why I got interested in these markets. You know, I've said this before in another video and people laugh. I have three passions of life: antiques and collectibles, finance, and classic literature. Well, the only way that I can apply classic literature to the antiques and collectibles trade is if and when I choose to collect and invest in first edition books. For instance, my favorite book of all time, you guys know that. If you watch this channel, it's F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. So really, my two other passions are finance and antiques and collectibles. Well, once we combine finance with the antiques and collectibles trade, we get collectible finance. And that's what I teach on this channel. And unfortunately, it is a dying art form. A lot of older individuals are not interested in teaching the younger generations about the investment potential and pitfalls of these items. That's where I come in. Believe it or not, there are baby boomers that have been collecting for years that are actually upset with me over this channel because they think that I'm giving away all this information for free that only a select few individuals had, and it took us many years, many decades to learn this stuff. So that's where I get criticized on this channel. I cannot win. I get criticized by the people that know what I'm teaching on this channel, and I also get criticized by the Timmys, Kimmys, and Poindexters that do not understand collectible finance. So I hope that answers your question now that I spent almost 9 minutes answering that one question. Next question. Sean, thoughts on the California wildfires and the collections lost in those fires? How will it affect the overall market? Okay, this is something where we have to take a step back. And this is where I have to ask my audience. If you had a copy of Action Comics 1 or Detective Comics 27 in any grade, I don't care what grade that book is in, because we all know, even if that book is in like 3.0 condition, it's still going to sell for six figures if it comes up for bid at auction. Do you seriously think you would leave that book unattended in your house? If you had a copy of that book, it would be either in a safe or a safe deposit box or some secure, off-site, climate-controlled vault storage facility. I think we can all agree on that. Now, where am I going with this? Well, every time there's a natural disaster, I see this happen a lot on the internet, on collecting forums. People think that that means automatically all these collections that those individuals own were lost in that natural disaster. If you follow my teachings, if you follow my work, what is it that I tell you? If you have a valuable collection of graded sports cards, comic books, rare coins, even vintage toys, I tell you guys to store the stuff off-site in vault-like storage conditions. So those conditions should be fireproof and also theft resistant. As a result, the amount of items that we think are damaged due to natural disasters is actually over-exaggerated by the internet. Now, to be fair, my heart goes out to you if you're affected by this. I do know for a fact there are certain individuals out there that, due to the California wildfires, due to some of the hurricanes and flooding we had, they did lose valuable collections of comic books, vintage toys, Pokemon cards, Magic the Gathering cards, and the like. That said, that's a very small amount compared to how many of those items are in existence. So what I'm telling you is, I understand if you went through this natural disaster and you lost the collection, that was very painful to you, and I emphasize. But for the most part, it is not as widespread as people think. One of the things that I learned very early on when I became a consultant in the antiques and collectibles trade, and for the record, I don't know if you know my history, I was actually pulled into this. This is not something that I stumbled upon. It was something that I was pretty much pulled into. I started writing for Antiques and Auction News right around 2013, and 2015, I started getting messages from individuals on LinkedIn who wanted help navigating some of these markets, whether it would be the rare coin marketplace, the art marketplace, the traditional antique marketplace, or even in certain instances, the pop culture collectible marketplace. And one of the things that was very interesting to me is that people who have high net worths, who diversify in the antiques and collectibles trade, they look at these markets completely different than the average Timmy, Kimmy, or Poindexter. And if they're going to buy something like a comic book that costs $100,000 or more, you better bet your ass that they're putting that item away in vault storage. They're putting it in a safety deposit box. They're putting it in a place where it's protected from the elements, from natural disasters, from potential theft. They're not hanging it on a wall in their house. You know, it always amazes me whenever I see a high-end piece of art that sells for $100 million or more. It's always amazing to me when the mainstream media comments on it. They act like the person, the billionaire that bought that painting, is taking it home and hanging it on the wall in their house. Most people that invest in art, they utilize art storage facilities like Crozier Fine Arts or RoboVault down in Florida. They do not have this stuff exposed to the elements or in a position where it can be easily stolen or damaged. That is a myth. So that is why I'm telling you this. I understand that there's people out there that did lose collections due to a natural disaster. And again, as a consultant in the trade, as a fellow collector, as a fellow human being, I feel for you. But most people who have higher end collections know how to protect this stuff. And that's the secret to investing, to diversifying into these markets that you got to learn if you want to be successful, especially if you do, unfortunately, live in a disaster-prone area. You know, I'm very lucky. I live in the Philadelphia area, and I could tell you firsthand, I have never went through a tornado, Any hurricane that I went through was extremely mild because it's more the Jersey Shore that is exposed to hurricanes, not really inland 60 miles from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I really have never experienced a major earthquake. I have never experienced a major wildfire. I've never experienced a tsunami. So where I live, it's relatively safe. Now, there are those of you out there, you can't help the area that you work in. You can't help the area that you love. You can't help the area that you grew up in. And maybe you are exposed to natural disasters on a more regular basis. If that's you, you have to take precautions to protect the items that you collect, the items that you invest in, especially if they have a very high financial value. If you are diversifying into these markets and your collection starts getting up there, especially close or above, like I have, 6 figures invested in these markets, it needs to be protected. I have always been against collectors that tell me, Sean, I need to control everything that I have. I need everything that I have in my personal residence. I need to live with my collection. If you need to live with your collection on a regular basis, I hate to say this, you should probably talk to a therapist because that's more of an attachment issue than it is a wise investment strategy. Next question. Sean, what does your Neal Adams Batman/Detective Comics collection look like? I mean, do you realistically have 10 copies of Batman 251 in, say, 9.6 condition? I get questions like this all the time. Look, guys, I don't buy numerous copies of the same high-end, high-grade collectible. So let me give you an example here. I do have a Neal Adams Batman and Detective Comics collection. I have a copy of Batman 227, 232, 234, Batman 251, Detective Comics 400. They are all mega keys. Most of them are in the optimal collecting grade. So all those books I have roughly in 9.4, 9.6 condition. That's what I'm telling you. And I only have one copy of each. So when I invest in these markets, I typically do not buy multiple copies of the same item, even if it is in different grade. The only way I would do that is if a good deal comes along where I go, okay, this item's worth $2,000. I can get it for $1,400. I would buy it, potentially let it ride, see what the market does, or flip it right into the market and make a quick profit. That would be the only exception. So I want to make that very clear. I am not one of these hoarders out there that is like hoarding 10 copies of the same collectible, just in different grades or a similar grade. So I want to make that very clear. I consider myself one of the good guys. I do speculate in these markets. I do invest in these markets, but I have no desire to own, like you say here, 10 copies of Batman 251 in CGC 9.6 condition. That's just completely ridiculous to me. And if that's you, you do you. I'm not judging you if that's you. I do know Rudy with Alpha Investments, he gets a little hog wild. He goes nuts on some of these graded Magic cards that are PSA 10 condition. He has binders full of multiple different sets and quantities of certain reserve list Magic the Gathering cards, but that's his primary business. I understand why he's doing that. For someone like me who diversifies in multiple classes of antiques and collectibles, that would make no sense. For instance, I did show a portion of my rare coin collection in video on YouTube. And if you look, I do have a lot of different Carson City Morgan silver dollars, but it's not like I'm sitting on 5 1881 Carson City Morgan silver dollars in MS64 or MS65 condition. To me, that's completely ridiculous. So it's just how I choose to diversify in these markets. I hope that answers your question. Next question. Sean, are there any collectibles that you consider recession proof or recession resistant? Okay, in all honesty, over the long term, both gold and silver and collectibles and antiques make horrible, horrible inflationary hedges. Now, over the short term, they can be beneficial, but over the long term, if you look at the numbers, collectibles, gold, silver, antiques, even artwork, they really do not make good inflationary hedges. That said, I will tell you that there is virtually no correlation with collectibles and the overall performance of the stock market. So if you want to diversify into collectibles as a diversification or inflationary hedge, at least over the short term, it'll work to your benefit. Now, what would I recommend that you get into if you want to collect something that is truly close to being recession proof or recession resistant? I would tell you to go after generic gold and silver coins. It's that simple. Just like if you buy precious metals, if you bought precious metals right before COVID, right now you're sitting pretty. However, over the long term, if we compare the performance of gold and silver to that of the overall stock market, the stock market always wins. You can do your own research on this. But as a short-term inflationary hedge, it can work. So that is what I would tell you. I would tell you to go after, if you live in the United States, generic classic gold coins. Go after just common date St. Gaudens $20 gold pieces, and you can put together a collection of recession-proof coins. And you can have that in your portfolio if that's something that you're worried about. That is one reason why I choose to diversify in rare coins. Now, I go after scarce and semi-scarce key dates in ultra-high grade. That's pretty much my strategy for investing in coins. But everybody's different. There's a lot of coin collectors out there that do like to fool around with generic gold coins, and there's nothing wrong with that if that's you. I have just as much respect for you as I have for any other coin collector. It's a passion, it's something that you like, and it does solve the problem of a diversification hedge, especially given the fact that you're using it as an inflationary hedge over the short term. So that's how I would answer that. Next question. Sean, congratulations on 18,000 subscribers. What are your thoughts on Nintendo Game & Watch handheld units? These little fun liquid crystal video games came out way before the original Nintendo NES. They present key characters like Mario, Donkey Kong, and even Link with cool box art and creative pixel game design. Wow, you really like Nintendo Game & Watch handheld units. I can tell you have an emotional attachment just based on the way this question is worded. So let me give you my opinion here. I think if you're already, quote unquote, invested in original Nintendo games, you have some collection geared towards Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, GameCube, and you want to diversify into Game & Watch handheld units, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. The thing that I would caution you about is this is a very niche market. Most of the people that want to invest in original Nintendo items and collectibles want to go after the original Nintendo Entertainment System and games. That's why during the speculative bubble in graded video games, a lot of your top tier original Nintendo games shot through the stratosphere. You had the sticker sealed Mario game that shot up in value. You had a first copy of The Legend of Zelda, first production run copy of the gold cartridge that sold for a significant amount. You had Kid Icarus, Metroid, a lot of those early games selling for all-time highs. Most people really remember their attachment, their fondness for the original Nintendo Entertainment System. Now, I will tell you this. If you do price histories on a lot of these Game & Watch handheld systems, if you go back a couple of years, Heritage did have a video game signature sale where they had some of these pieces that were factory sealed and really high grade, that were graded by VGA, Video Game Authority, in like 85, 90 condition, that sold for thousands of dollars a piece. So if you buy right, I think you're going to do well in the long run with these type of units, as long as you're diversifying into this market rather than going at it full force and ignoring other Nintendo products and systems along the way. So in other words, if you were a client of mine, you utilized my consulting services and you said, Sean, what do you think about Game & Watch handheld units? I would tell you, there's a ton of organic collectability here. There's potential here, but just make sure you're not ignoring the Nintendo Entertainment System in your quest to build a collection of Game & Watch handheld units, because most people that relate to Nintendo want to own a piece of the original system that they all played, loved, and had as a kid. And unfortunately, Game & Watch handheld units were not it. The original Nintendo was. So I hope that answers your question. This is an untapped market. There is potential here. You just have to use caution if you're getting involved. Now, I will give you one more piece of advice. Let's say that you're listening to this right now and you're saying, well, geez, Sean, I can't afford spending thousands of dollars on these items. If that's you and you still want to go after this market, go after items in excellent condition that come complete in their original box. In my opinion, there's a lot of value there and there's a lot of room for appreciation. Because compared to most Nintendo games, compared to items like Super Nintendo games, Nintendo 64, Nintendo GameCube, these items are much more harder to find in excellent working condition, especially if they come in their original boxes. Hope that helps. This concludes part 6 of the 18,000 subscriber Q&A series. I will do my best to get part 7 uploaded as soon as possible. In the interim, let me know your thoughts and feedback in the comment section below. And if you are subscribed to this channel, just maybe, I will see you in another upcoming video.